Et gaff til a gaff. Et gaff til a gaff. I'm in with the till a gaff. Illy with the till a gaff. Nit gaff, nit gaff. Nit gaff, nit gaff.
So one of my earliest memories of parenting is my mum and dad coming to the home and watching me interact with my children. And my mum said to me, you know, you don't tell your children any lies whatsoever. You don't do any baby talk with them. You just talk to them normally and you tell them the truth. And I always remember her saying that, you know, with this great kind of surprise and a little bit of awe, which is odd for my parents, you know. Never people who were very great at giving praise or encouragement. So that always stuck with me for that reason, because it was like, you know, veiled praise and encouragement. And it's so interesting because, you know, it was nice because it was absolutely by design. It wasn't by accident. I absolutely made a decision. Now, it's funny, she said this about my daughter. My son's 3 years older. So I'd actually already made a decision before my son was born to absolutely always tell them as much of the truth as was sensible and appropriate all of the time. Always tell them as much of the truth that was sensible and appropriate all of the time. And as a parent, that's a very, I'm going to say brave decision. That's just a very specific decision that you've made. And I've seen the opposite. And I mean, like, you know, I'm talking about all the stuff. I mean, I used to get cussed for telling my kids there's no Father Christmas. Like, people would lose their shit. When I told my kids that there's no tooth fairy and there's no Father Christmas, people would literally, and I actually get it, because one of the things we as adults admire is, you know, the wonder and the imagination and the innocence and the naivety of children. So I get why people would think I was a horrible human being and possibly even borderline abusive for taking that away from my kids. I absolutely got it. You know, taking away the wonder of Christmas, and particularly, we don't celebrate Christmas anyway. So that was a whole nother, you know, view that people had, that I'd abused my kids by taking that particular festival and celebration of it away from them. But even just the whole idea of there being a Santa Claus and a Lapland and a reindeer and him coming down the chimney at night delivering presents, and, you know, I just like, all fake, tooth fairy, all fake. Do you know what I mean? And just all fake. Fake news, kids. Nothing to see here. You know, and I know why people love to keep that wonderment and that naivety and that magic in kids' minds by telling them these lies. But I had made a decision before my first child was born. I was going to do none of that, because I personally saw it as more destructive than constructive. And I truly believe that children will find their own wonderment and magic. And there's a lot of wonderment and magic in the real world, or just in their own imaginations, without us foisting our own bullshit on them, which is usually wonderment and magic that we're foisting on them for our purposes, not for their enjoyment. An example being, as time went on. So an example of the same thing as time went on is I always spoke to my children as age appropriately, honestly, about sex as I could. I didn't go into graphic detail, but, you know, they were never told that storks delivered babies. And when it came to talking about drugs from a very young age, 12, 13, in stark contradiction to their mother, and much to her annoyment, I told them that not all drugs are bad. Drugs don't instantly ruin your life. Lots of people quite happily take drugs and get on living quite normally. They're called functioning junkies. But there is a potential that some drugs can ruin your life. It really depends on your own personal physiology and levels of willpower. And if you're going to ever experiment with drugs, which you probably are, because, you know, it's natural to want to experiment with things, the most important rules are whatever you take a very small amount of it. So don't take a whole batch of whatever it is. If it's a pill, take a nib of the pill. If it's a spliff, take 2 puffs. You know, if it's a coke, don't take a line. Take a quick snort, and use it as a test to see how it affects you. And only ever do drugs with people you really know and really trust. So if you have a fucked up reaction and you start convulsing on the floor, or swallowing your own vomit, the people around you are going to be the kind of people who care about you to call an ambulance and stay there to make sure that their paramedics get there and help you, rather than the kind of people who don't know you and just run the fuck off because they want to wash their hands of the situation. That's what I told my kids about drugs. None of this, it's all wrong, it's all evil, stay away from it, it's dangerous, it's the bogeyman. We don't really do bogeymen in our family, at least I don't do bogeymen, at all. So what I was going to say is, one of the reasons I had this view, I knew exactly what it was conceptually, but I'll tell you what I've seen in it when people are the absolute opposite. Two examples, one with the children and one without. There was a unforgettable scenario for me. We came here to Spain, we migrated, we moved home. Lots of other people moved home, migrated. Some of us made it work just about by the skin of our teeth, I hasten to add, no boasting there. And some people just didn't, said fuck it and went back to the UK where it was easier to make a living. And there was one example, typical kind of real estate, just all bullshit and bluster, where somebody had sort of been lying to his family that everything was okay until he just couldn't lie anymore. And he'd booked the flights to take the whole family home. And he'd only told the family, the children, that they were returning to the UK, giving up their life in Spain on the morning that they were going to catch the planes. And he was on the phone to someone I knew and he was saying to him, yeah, I've just told the kids, they're in such a terrible state. I can't stay on the phone long. They're screaming and crying, and that's I'm an extremist, as you well know, and that's the extreme. That's where you end up when you have the habit of lying and lying to your children. You start with little lies. Oh, it's okay. It's not so bad. Things will be better. There's no problems here. Yeah, we're doing lovely. We sold 5 last week. And all the time you're racking up stupid shitloads of debt. And because your kids think you sold 5 last week, there's no reason for them not to have the latest iPhone, the latest trainers, to go to the latest party, to arrive in a limo. So you stretch yourself with more debt to do all of that shit. Because once you start lying, it's hard to get out of that hole. And then, you just make the whole situation worse until the whole thing explodes. Unhappily for my kids, I just told them the truth. I told them when I was making money. I told them when I wasn't. I told them how my business works. It's feast or famine. It's not consistent. I told them that our lifestyle was going to be different to some of their friends. I explained to them that if they had a friend who had a long-term permanent job and got paid every single month, they would be able to budget in a very different way from us. I made it clear I wasn't very good at budgeting anyway, but the reality of the feast or famine is that even if I put money away in the family, it gets used up. Usually, something I've been trying to work on for the last 20 years, you want to replenish that before it's all used up. It doesn't always happen. And sometimes it's gone before you get to replenish it. So in the feast and famine, way of living, there's certain things I couldn't commit to, long-term, monthly, that kind of stuff. I just made them understand the reality of what we were living. I made them understand when there was no fucking money, when there were no contracts, when there was no sales happening, not to terrorize them or make them freak out, but because I trusted them. I trusted their ability to process that information and to make their own decisions accordingly. And much to their praise, nothing to do with me, I had a parental experience of raising my children where my children didn't come to me with ridiculous fucking demands. We only ever get one shot of raising our kids, and I have no idea if I fuck them up. No parent does. But what I do know is I didn't have children who came to me demanding the latest of things. They would ask me if we could afford shit. And I think they had the trust knowing me and my personality. If I could afford it, I'd buy it for them. If I could afford it and I didn't think it was bad for them, I had no personal dislike of whatever the fuck it was, whether it's a PlayStation or a Nintendo or a pair of jeans or trainers up. If I had the money, you'd get it. But if I didn't have the money, I'd tell you I didn't have the money. And my children were always like, okay, cool. 90% of the time, maybe 80. But so few times were they, unhappy with that scenario that I literally barely don't remember it. I just assume I'm giving a 20% margin for error. I think I made my point, so I won't go into another example because, I think my point's been made. The cause of this, why this came into my mind, is because I'm looking at the things that's happening with coronavirus and people's adherence to the lockdown and people's proposed willingness to take the vaccine. And I'm just thinking to myself that the root cause, and this is not because I'm fucking agnorist, I think most people know this, The root cause of most of the problems we have at the moment is nobody fucking trusts the government. Half the people on my fucking social media feeds don't even trust the news channels, as I put in another podcast, another short. There is this massive distrust of the BBC, which I find mind-boggling. Okay, I know, if I haven't said it before, let me make it clear. Al Jazeera in English is the only news channel probably in the world. DW is a close second. I think there's some truth in the royalty as well. But and after that, it's just grades, right? It's grades of political opinion. The BBC, as I made in my last podcast, is very left-wing, which now means that the right-wing people just don't believe the shit they say. I get it. But I think, you should have enough intelligence to be able to tell the difference between opinion. For example, everybody should be treated equal, or gay marriages are right. That's opinion. Yeah, even if it's news. But news, like there was a flood in Derbyshire this morning, is either true or it's not. The cause of the flood, who knows? Could be lying, could have been a government conspiracy, could have been a lot of rain. But the fact there was a flood is another thing, whereas people seem to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So they're just like, I don't believe fucking anything that's said. I'm like, well, you can't believe that it's not going to, flood tomorrow if there's a fucking, if there's a warning. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So my point is, it really concerns me the extent to which people don't fucking believe the news. And I have a full understanding and appreciation of why people don't trust and believe politicians. Now, I come from a radical black power, politic militant background where we had every reason not to believe politicians and the news. Just ask us about smallpox blankets being given to Native Americans, or the Tuskegee experiment where they allowed syphilis to run rampant in black communities to see how people died. Just as a few. And the problem I had is the things that we would call conspiracy theories before we had the proof, and we were called nut jobs because we knew they were happening, but we didn't have the kind of proof that would be accepted by people outside of our circle. As I said, God bless America, and I mean that. They have this rule in America where they have this, I can't remember what it's exactly called, but a 50-year rule, where after 50 years they start to disclose some of the things that the government had done that had been done in secrecy, even if parts of it are redacted. So things that we knew were happening, like the infiltration of Black Power organizations, like the Black Panther movement, or, the things that were done to Castro to try and assassinate him, or the things that were done to Martin Luther King to try and discredit him. The things that we at the time, now I wasn't there, right? But, the things that the people at that time knew were happening but couldn't prove were later proven to be true. So we have our proof of why not to trust the government. Because while they were trying to tell you that don't listen to Martin Luther King, he's a socialist and he's an agitator and he's a this and he's a that, they were trying to maneuver things in order to discredit him as that, because they knew that he wasn't. So they were lying to you and trying to create that scenario. And we have umpteen examples of it. If you've got the time to start reading through those things, depending on your political persuasion, whether it's you're an environmentalist or you are a socialist, McCarthy's and Reds under the beds, all of that shit, all the fuckery that these guys done, in America at least, is now available for you to see. And what you have to extrapolate from that, unless you are just genuinely a fucking idiot, is they're still doing it. Which means the things that we don't trust now, and we know in our gut feeling, or we've got enough information to know that this isn't right, but we can't prove it with photographs and documents, will probably be provable in 50 years from now. So we don't trust our governments. We don't trust our politicians. Our politicians, the two that are most closely, in my life, Donald Trump, because he's just like, this worldwide phenomenon, and Boris Johnson, are absolutely provable liars. Like consistent, non-stop, near pathological liars. People who will lie, get caught out, but proven it's a lie, and then just do the same thing again. Why? Because their popularity doesn't wane when they lie, so why would you stop? Most people's behaviors are driven by the effect those behaviors have on their lifestyles. So if you spit at everybody you meet and therefore nice people don't want to associate with you, it's a good incentive to stop spitting on everyone. But if you lie to everybody you meet and it only just leads to you getting further and further promoted to higher positions, then you have no incentive to stop lying. In fact, you have an incentive to continue lying. So we don't trust our politicians. We have every reason not to trust them. But here's the problem. When the politicians need the people to trust them, now they're fucked. Because now they need the people to follow the health guidelines. But we've had so many examples of when they lied to us about health guidelines that weren't true. I don't have to go back to, smallpox and blankets and Tuskegee. As I said, I don't trust vaccines. I did this very short stint in medical sales, and I know that, we were taught to push the vaccine where we got the biggest commission from, irregardless to if it had the biggest amount of side effects. So I don't trust any of those fuckers. I don't trust the government. I'm not going to pull up examples because I'm not that kind of guy. But I know with a short amount of research, there will be lots of examples of when the government has lied about pollution, vaccines that don't work. I never trusted the fucking MMR. Just loads of stuff. And we have a groundswell in our back in the day. It was the fucking radicals and the militants and the people on the edge of society like me who had this distrust. But you know what? The governments are so fucked. They've now swamped their fucking majority of the population into some levels of distrust. So if I say things like, when this whole conversation is like, because I now trust the government, I never fucking trusted them. It's just now a lot more fucking dangerous in the world that so many fewer people trust the government and are making their decisions based on that, because the information that they're getting, the information, the sources they are trusting are just as untrustworthy as the government, or fucking even worse. Hence the rise of Donald Trump. You don't trust the government. Back in the day, it was a couple of fucking lunatics training out in the woods and blowing up the Oklahoma State building who didn't trust the government. That's how it was 20 years ago. Yeah, now it's fucking 48% of the American population who trust the government so little that they'd like somebody like Donald Trump. They support someone like Donald Trump to go in there and drain the swamp, because that's how much they distrust the structure and the practice of American government. So my point is, it isn't always possible to tell the truth. I'm actually a big believer in lies, by the way. But I'm really a believer in getting the right result more than anything else. So my point being, I lie if it's the right thing to get the right result. And I trust my morality to decide what that is. So don't get it twisted. I ain't trying to say that I'm some holier than thou, whatever that politician was. I cannot tell a lie. I don't know if it's Jefferson or whatever. No, fuck that. I lie all the motherfucking time. I lie like I swear. As you know, if you listen to this podcast, all the motherfucking time. But my aim is usually, it has a decent moral aim in the lie. And I'm trying to get a result. Not lying to my children was to get a result. The result was to get them to trust me and also to stop them being able to be lied to by other people. So they didn't get into the habit of happily believing lies or happily wanting to believe shit that they knew wasn't true. Because kids get to a point where they know that Santa Claus isn't true, but they just happily want to believe that shit. I didn't want my kids to do that, because that makes you very easy to be manipulated by people who aren't telling you these so-called, excuse the racist terminology, white lies, but people who are telling you lies that they can use to manipulate and exploit you. So I didn't want them to be in that situation, that scenario. And that's a conversation for another day. The point I'm making today is this. The world is so fucked, and we have so much reason, proof and evidence not to trust successive levels of government, and even more, I truly believe, because they lie so rampantly and unequivocally and unashamedly. More proof not to trust the politicians who are currently in government today. He hasn't left yet, even though the Electoral College has, approved Biden. Donald Trump, as a day of me recording this, is still the president. Boris Johnson is still the Prime Minister of the UK. These are both two sequential, non-stop, near pathological liars who are now telling us that we should trust them for the good of the nation. It's fuckety fucked. So it's going to be so interesting to see who decides to take a COVID vaccine, who decides, people are already not bothering to go into lockdown. They're not following lockdown rules. Why would you? When I said before, I already said that Dominic Cummings was gonna be the fucking end of the world. I called him Professor Moriarty. And just the mere fact that a little cunt like him blatantly disobeyed the COVID rules was just a fucking green light to all the other people who said, well, this is bollocks. And if it isn't bollocks, why should I follow it? Though that fucker doesn't follow it, and he's the advisor to the Prime Minister. So if he doesn't have to follow it, why the fuck should I? It's the lies that cause the problem. Because you can fool some people sometime, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And the mistrust we have in the governments from all the sometimes they fooled us until we realize how many times they actually lied to us are what's going to cause the bigger problems, because now we need society to be cohesive and take certain actions for its own benefit. We actually don't believe that that's true. We believe it's bullshit and they're lying to us again. And I'm out.
Et gaff til a gaff. Et gaff til a gaff. I'm illy with the till a gaff. Illy with the till a gaff. Nit gaff, nit gaff. Nit gaff, nit gaff.